Given that to John T, the police department are very slow about giving the video out to families. But when it comes to showing the person that they just killed in an awful light, you know, they showed John drunk and
last piece when once he was here in Canada before he got sick. And all they do on here is like this. They only show you the tone of skin. This is how they are. As long as their color is so perfect. If it is so, my question to them is, what does your race have to offer to equal to take me down a peg or two, because I speak many languages. I'm talented as a carver or whatnot. They don't say this on it. They only show you this. This is how they portray us because our skin tone is different.
Like I said, it's speeches. I mean, this is it's essentially similar to what's happening now, and this is how many years ago?
Right. God, they put this for here. People get on social media, get on YouTube.
If we could, we're gonna. Everybody heard of step up, step back? So, just to make sure everybody gets a chance, if you get to chime in during one of them, so that we, kind of make sure that we can kind of spread it around. Sort of like, I guess, step back to somebody, like if you want to say something, but you've already said something, but somebody else wants to say something, let them go first before you do that. I think they call it like progressive stack or something like that.
It feels a lot like it's the same follow the same propaganda machine, because what it depicts is the Klan, which we know a lot of the Klan became police officers. The Klan is the good guys going around shooting these bad black people, slandering them, which we know a lot of times is just lies about like representative assault, but also nowadays they not only slander people with things like that where they're completely false, but they manipulate and take stuff out of context so they don't see people as full people. So even if someone does have a background, you're not seeing them as the full people in the context of why they have that background and how they were targeted in the first place. And they use the propaganda machine to make literally seems to go along skin tone. Black is bad and is associated with crime and criminals, thugs, whatever. While white and cop is good, though we know that police have one of the highest murder rates when they murder people, like the highest race out of all people, right? Because they're 0.2 of the population, but was it 1.2% of the murders are done by 2.2% of the murders done by police. Hold it up and then dehumanizes us, so we can justify us being killed and abused.
So the clip, actually bipolar that we'll go to now, sort of talks about sort of the building of fear, and sort of like how America first began, well, modern America started using propaganda to sort of build fear. It's one, yeah, that's
When you cut on your local news at night, you see black men being paraded across the screen in handcuffs.
Black people, black men and black people in general are overrepresented in news as criminals. When I say overrepresented, that means they are shown as criminals more times than is accurate that they are actually criminals, right? Based on FBI statistics.
I mean, I'm a big believer in the power of media full of these cliches that basically present mostly black and brown folks who seem like animals in cages, and then someone can turn off the TV thinking it's a good thing for prisons because otherwise those crazy people would be walking down my block.
Creating a context where people are afraid, and when you make people afraid, you can always justify putting people in a garbage can.
Chances are you could run into a kid waiting to relieve you of your purse or wallet.
Every media outlet in the country thinks I'm less than human. I began to hear the word super predator as if that was my name.
Super predator, predator, super predator. Super predators. And that's the word they use. Very, very effective.
Experts call them super predators.
They are not just gangs of kids anymore. They are often the kinds of kids that are called super predators. No conscience, no empathy.
Group of kids who are growing up essentially fatherless, godless, and jobless.
For me, what's more disturbing is the degree to which black people bought into that.
Animals, beasts that needed to be controlled.
When those grandmothers say, but he's a good boy, he never did anything. Don't you believe it?
Many black communities began to actually support policies that criminalize their own children.
Last night, the 18 accused of the attack were arraigned on charges of rape and attempted murder.
In the Central Park jogger case, they put 5 innocent teens in prison because the public pressure to lock up these quote-unquote animals was so strong.
You better believe that I hate the people that took this girl and raped her brutally. You better believe it.
Donald Trump wanted to give these kids a death penalty, and he took out a full-page ad to put the pressure on them. These children, 4 of them under 18, all went to adult prisons for 6 to 11 years before DNA evidence proved they were all innocent.
We make them their crime. That's how we introduce them. Well, that's a rapist.
Any thoughts?
My name is Mary Alice Motts. I am Cherokee. This is not the Americas. I am not American. I live on Turtle Island. I am a Cherokee, descended from Nimrod Jarrett Smith, 4th elected chief in North Carolina. It's my great grandfather, 3 times removed. I grew up in the South. I was about 12. The last time I climbed a tree and cut someone down, while my dad held on to them and lowered them gently to the ground. It was the black minister of the church that we passed to get to our church. And that particular year, before we moved from that neighborhood, there were 3, but the one that stood out most for me was that black minister that came from a family that was loving and caring. His wife, Virginia, worked for many of the people in the area. Helped our family out many times as well when Mother or Dad was sick. So I grew up seeing that happen. I grew up watching my dad jump into his buggy with the horse and the wagon late in the night. And I'd say, Daddy, I want to go, and he'd say, you can't go to this. I watched burnings. I watched tarring and feathers. I slipped into that wagon under the cotton sheets. And when we got to the house where the tarring and feathering and the burning, the cross was burning. And people were, there's something that doesn't leave you. My dad got down out of that wagon. He only had one arm. One double-barrel shotgun went under the paralyzed arm. The other double-barrel in his right hand. And I raised up the little wagon and I watched. And when my dad clicked that shotgun, those Klansmen stood to attention. Indians were killed also. The only reason my dad survived to fight the Klansmen is because he had married one of the lead Klansmen's daughter. By mistake, he didn't know. He didn't know that Grandpa Smith was a lead Klansman. He only knew he wanted that short, heavy-set, big-bosomed woman in that cotton field. So he took her and rode away on horseback with her. Her consent. They got married. 3 days later, went back. That's when he found out that he had married the Klansman's daughter. And he fought against her brothers. His own brother-in-laws were leaders. Or he fought against her grandfather. Or against her father, my grandfather. What Grandpa Smith did was to give them the best slave house. Move the slaves to another house. That was before 1962. So I grew up, there's nothing like it until you've had to take someone from a tree and go and tell their family, your dad, your father, your husband, your granddad has been hanged. It is so horrible what happens. And everybody sits here and they think, oh, it's not that bad. Let me tell you, when 9/11 happens, I was trapped in South Carolina for 2 weeks. Trapped. No trains, no buses, nothing. There were hangings every single night. 5, 6. One night, the top was 8. What the police radios were saying, and everyone's homes back there have police radios. They listen to everything. And they were saying, hey, we got another suicide swinger over by the river, and depending on the river and the side of town. A lot are over by Lugoff, a lot on the back side of my uncle's farm, down Black River. It's, you know, I couldn't believe it. I called CNN News. They never said a word about it. They listened, and it was never posted. I called newspapers. They refused. The day 9/11 happened, the governor flew the Confederate flag, even though federal had said no Confederate flags. You couldn't pass a home without a Confederate flag in the yard. Not on Galloway Hill, but my mother's relatives all had Confederate flags flying high. I have a family member that has chosen to follow the German grandfather and be a Klansman. He and I don't talk. So let me tell you, until you've seen it in action, and when you see all these cops around here with the skinheads, guess what, folks? They're all Klansmen. Ian Burke grew up in Klan City, a big mother cell right up by concrete. And for him to sit in that courtroom and say, I never knew the Williams existed. He's a lying sack of shit. Pardon my language. But I'm very, very, I'm angry that they killed John T. He was my hug buddy. No, I did not have any of his children. I've been asked if he fathered my youngest daughter. My youngest daughter is 46. I was done with having babies. I think he was I don't know, he was very young when she was born. Rick is the age of my eldest daughter. So I've been around a while, and I couldn't believe it when I got asked that by a news person. Which one of your children did John T. father? And I said he wasn't old enough to have fathered any of them. Number one, when I lived on Magnolia Hill in 1968 when my last one was born. So no, but these guys, Ian Burke grew up in the town right next to Concrete. How do, because we accidentally, I lived in Alaska and I came down and we all me and my children all got together and we went up to see adopted grandparents, the neighborhood grandparents where my children had lived for a few years after we retired from the military. And we just accidentally needed to turn around when we realized we missed the turn going to Cedar Woolley back in the woods where Grandma and Grandpa lived. And they were coming out the meeting house with all of their clothes, their white sheets. So I've been there, and I'm sitting there with a dark, my family is multiracial. My son-in-law from Haiti, you know, the son driving the car, blonde hair, blue eyes. My daughter, dark skin, dark eyes, brown, dark curly hair. So I said, don't stop. Turn this, go to the end of the road, turn this car around and get the hell out of here. Because we will all be hanged today if you stop. Just turn around and go back the way we came from. And, you know.
It's a lot. Anybody else have?
So for me, this is really, I lived it, folks.
Yes.
And these cops with skinheads, they're part of the Klan.
Yes.
I arrived a little bit late, so I don't know how it happened before. My name is Dora. I was born here in the city, based in Vancouver Island. My father's from the Blackfeet tribe in Montana. And the question that has come up for me lately is this continent was, there were native people here before contact. And when the Europeans came, they brought with them black men. And the Europeans established themselves, they took over, they did whatever. So between all of that and now, I don't understand why they have such hate for anybody who is not white. Why they have such, they seem to have this idea that we are less than everything. That we don't warrant respect on a basic level. And it shows in the way they treat all of us. And just to, I don't want to take up too much time, but in the last couple of years, I had had a change of mind about the police in general. I had never really thought about them before. My son and I were coming home from an after-school event. Our street was closed because it was flooded at the end, but not up where we lived. And there was a police van outside of our building. So I talked to the cop, I said, we have to leave for a school event and then come back after dark, so what's the protocol? He says, well, you just come up and when you're approached, show your ID, prove you live here, fine. It was dark. There was a cop car, but there was nobody around, just the cop car. He didn't get out, he didn't flash his lights, he didn't do anything. So I pulled in, still nothing. So I got out of the car and I saw there was a cop in the car. I went around and talked to him and he just seemed annoyed. Annoyed just being there. I don't know if he got pulled for a shift he didn't want to work, but whatever it was, he was already annoyed before we got there. And it seemed like no matter what I said, no matter what, our conversation just felt like it was going in the wrong direction. It felt like he was wanting me to say or do something to warrant him to get his butt out of that car and arrest me. And all I kept thinking was about my son who was in the back seat. And that's the first time that I understood somebody is confronted by a cop and they have to be afraid. They have to be afraid at all. So I'm here to basically hear other ideas and other experiences and come up with an answer and fix this because it's wrong. We shouldn't be afraid to live in our own cities, our own towns, to be who we are. So, thank you.
Anybody notice any familiar faces in that clip?
She's on the ballot this year.
Presidential candidates.
Yeah, two presidential candidates. If you could chime in a little bit with what Block the Bunker, how it came about, and what y'all
So, first, I know they want to stay anonymous, but I still want to give credit to people. It actually started with one of the people from Seattle Black Book Club, the woman, a black woman that went out and had the first it was like a little barbecue that was from the people about it. And basically there had been information that people found out about this $160 million bomb-proof bunker they wanted to build in North End, which is the new precinct. And literally one of the things they brought up was quickly how we have one of the highest, quickest rising housing populations without houses. We have social services closing left and right, but we want to spend $160 million on a police bunker. And then the question is, well, with that, knowing that they're still under their DOJ investigation, which still haven't really applied to, and the 44 problematic officers still on duty and still working, not to mention the history of police as a whole and the type of role they play in society. Why should they be getting $160 million to build a bunker that we do not need and hire more police that we do not need on the street, when we could actually solve a lot of the issues by investing that money in community? And I think it goes to the misnomer of the history of the police. I think we talk a lot about that because everybody blocked the bunker, or not reforming police, the police will not even belong. We had hundreds of years without them. And the thing is, we have ways of taking care of our own communities, and we got to get back to those, because if we don't, then we're going to have an occupying force and continue to kill our people, continue to prison them. It's really, I think, one of our things about the history of the misnomer of what police are here for. Because we're never here to protect us. That's a lie. They originated as slave catchers, and that was to ensure investments and get labor. And then when Reconstruction happened, slavery didn't end. It turned into prisons. Because every slave that was released became a vagabond, which then became illegal at that point, which then left them being chain gangs and prisons, and so now we got a prison complex. So those things being linked, I think, is a big part of our analysis. But I think I'll agree, so I'll give it straight.
Yeah, cool. Is there anything that folks here that want to do something, either donate or show up, or is there anything that people can do to help things moving forward?
I don't know if we still have, there's 2 donating pages going to Seattle Black Book Club, which is organizing around Block the Bunker, as well as juvie, and as well as stopping gentrification. And there's also one, there was, I don't know if it's still up, but for Block the Bunker, it was a fundraiser, which went to some of the actions that we did where we basically some theatrics where we changed it all together. So if you follow us on Facebook, you can connect with us. And we're right now going into the stages of, one, trying to stop the police from getting the budget, which is coming up. They want to try to get more police officers on the streets, and we're like, no, that's not what we need at all. And also we're starting to do a lot more of events to help recharge people's batteries, also raise funds for future organizing, because the bunker at this point is just paused, not stopped, which everybody says stop, it's not. And the police problem is still a problem even if we stop this bunker, because the violence is going through our communities, it's still going through communities, and they're not there to respond. One of the things that have been to respond to anything that's actually going on in trauma, one of the things that actually is going up, and I'm not a big fan of electoral politics, but O'Brien is actually pushing this forward that we put to him, which is having first responders that are not police. in Seattle, and then this is only Seattle because of city council, but because when we have police that their job is to incarcerate people responding to it, then we know that we get a lot of violence, we get a lot of people turning up dead, we get a lot of people getting thrown away instead of getting the help they need. And if we have first responders that are based off social service type models or community-based models, which is really what a lot of us support at Block Bunker, it's community-based models, then we can actually address the issues that are in our community versus having police come, and then a lot of times it just adds to the problem. Actually, all the time, just how bad is that going to add to the problem?
I just wanted to add to what you were saying about Fuller, not just chasing slaves down, but they also wore uniforms and guns to push natives off their lands and steal from them. So this has happened simultaneously, and that's why we have a shared history together. And we all have historical trauma that my grandmother felt and her grandmother felt is in me, genetic. Right? That passes down. It's a proven fact. So us coming together to fight these issues is very, very key to winning this battle that's been going on, since this country was formed, right? So we're in it together.
Most of the 20th century, it didn't go up a lot, it didn't come down a lot, but that changed in the 1970s. And in the 1970s, we began an era which has been defined by this term, mass incarceration.
It's a nation of laws, and as Abraham Lincoln has said, no one is above the law, no one is below the law, and we're going to enforce the law, and Americans should remember that if we're going to have
breaking rocks out here on the chain gang, breaking rocks and serving my time. Breaking rocks out here on the chain gang, 'cause I've been convicted of crime. I hold it steady right there while I hit it.
Each moment in history is a fleeting time, precious and unique. But some stand out as moments of beginning, in which courses of decades or centuries. This can be such a moment.
It's with the Nixon era and the law and order period when crime begins to stand in for race.
If there is one area where the word war is appropriate, it is in the fight against crime.
Part of what he talked about was a war on crime, but that was one of those code words, what we might call dog whistle politics now, which really was referring to the black political movements of the day, Black Power, Black Panthers, the anti-war movements for women's liberation and gay liberation at that time, which Nixon felt compelled to fight back against.
Once the federal government, through the FBI, moves into an area, this should be warning to those who engage in these acts that they eventually are going to be apprehended.
There's this outcry for law and order, and Nixon becomes the person who articulates that perfectly.
There can be no progress in America without respect for law.
Many people felt like we were losing control.
We need total war in the United States against the evils that we see in our cities.
Federal spending for local law enforcement will double. Time is running out for the merchants of crime and corruption in American society. The wave of crime is not going to be the wave of the future in the United States of America.
We must wage what I have called total war against public enemy number one in the United States, the problem of dangerous drugs.
A war on drugs, and that utterance gave to deal with drug addiction and drug dependency as a crime issue rather than a health issue. Hundreds of thousands of people were being sent to jails and prisons for simple possession of marijuana, for low-level offenses.
America's public enemy number one in the United States is drug abuse. In order to fight and defeat this enemy, it is necessary to wage a new all-out offensive.
Listen, call for law and order becomes integral to something that comes to be known as the Southern strategy. Nixon begins to recruit Southern whites, formerly staunch Democrats, into the Republican fold.
Persuading poor and working class whites to join the Republican Party in droves.
By speaking to, in subtle and non-racist terms,
with thinly veiled racial appeals.
Talking about crime, by talking about law and order, or the chaos of our urban cities unleashed by the civil rights movement.
We have launched an all-out offensive against crime, against narcotics, against permissiveness in our country.
The rhetoric of get tough and law and order was part and parcel of the backlash of the civil rights movement.
Nixon administration official has admitted that the war on drugs is all about throwing black people in jail. He said, quote, "The Nixon campaign in 1968 and the Nixon White House after that had two enemies, the anti-war left and black people." You understand what I'm saying? We knew we couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or black. But by getting the public to associate the hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin, and then criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. We could arrest their leaders, raid their night after night on the evening news. Did we know we were lying about the drugs? Of course we did.
I want to acknowledge the president of the NAACP for the states of Washington, Oregon, and Alaska, Gerald Hankerson. And we were just watching a clip. Anybody have any feedback?
I mean, I think it's been really like frustrating to me to watch the response to like the heroin epidemic now that's largely affecting white communities, and then all of a sudden the police and conservative mayors and politicians, and liberal politicians too, what I'm talking about, are all chasing themselves to make sure that like cops have like this first responder drug, like instead of just criminalizing them, right? And it's like now that white people are experiencing, it's like, oh, we have to like look at the situation totally differently, and also like with marijuana becoming legal, right now it's mostly an industry run and dominated by white people, and we still have folks in prison for marijuana charges. And there's no restitution paid or no acknowledgement of the damage that's happened in the past 30 years to these communities. And it's just the hypocrisy of the drug war is very frustrating and horrible.
Marijuana, right? So I'm gonna make this really like clear, right? When they legalize it, for people who do not have the money to open a legal business, the crime is harder than it was before legalization. They sweeped up 30 people in the U district for selling weed, right? And if you have over a quarter, you're selling over a quarter, it's a felony now. Before it was a misdemeanor because marijuana was decriminalized. And so, like, even like when they say they're like, oh, we're making progress, it still tends to want to leave out the people who are paying their rent, taking care of their kids off it, which tend to be black and brown folks that are below the poverty line, and then living in this city, particularly, that nobody wants to give us a job, even if we don't have record, much as we have record, and trying to look out for our people. I think the drug war is also fundamental because for me, like when I went to the joint, I went to the joint for selling drugs, right? We're trying to be able to put a roof over my head. Not because I wanted to be rich, not because I even believe that was a possibility, because once you walk out there in the rain for hours, trying to hustle these little stones, you realize real quick you ain't gonna be rich off this, you're just gonna pay your rent, right? And so I think that's still a really fundamental thing that has gone from then to now. And then also the thing of like you talk about Ricky Ross and other people and how they push those drugs into our communities in the first place. It's kind of complicated there. You know what I mean? It's kind of funny.
Hey, I got something to say too. This is a meeting about people with black minds and stuff. There's a lot of people like what's going on, and it's the government. It's what do you call that one website that you can go into, prisonplanet.com. Take a look at that, see, and if you agree, And it's all about how you come into court. We gotta be the court, the people. We the people is where it begins, and they got a website called We the People _shareholders. And I would like for everybody to go to that place and look at it and see what you think, because the new Communist Party is something. Well, hell, you want to learn and what you want to be, because the government, well, you want to come in as a republic. You come in as a republic, and then you can be a part of the We the People, and that's how it works. But it's a prison planet. See, the only thing they doing is it's all about bonding, and the bankers already bonded the people to get Social Security numbers. That's where it comes from. If you check all this out, you find out that it all comes off that number. But you got to go and get the number, and once you get the number, you can go in and become a banker. And the banker is what controls everything. It's the money. Follow the money. And I'm sure you know how to understand it. Go ahead.
Hey, so to piggyback what Paula was saying, my problem is if you go to Skyway, if you go to Seattle, you know what I'm saying, you see all these dispensaries out there, you feel me? But then you got the Redmond City Council that's pretty much, they're saying, no, we don't want no dispensaries in the city.
And now I guess we'll transition